Welcome to another episode of the Living Inspired podcast. Today, I'm going to share with you a conversation I had with Dana Culp. She's the founder of Thrive Midlife Medicine, and she helps women in perimenopause and menopause. And she's got 25 years of experience, so I know you're going to get so much out of this episode, especially if you're a woman who is not sure about hormones. Maybe you just want to learn more. Maybe you also just are interested in this time of life and what options are available. For me, I had so many questions, and Dana was a wealth of information and kindness, and I just love this conversation, and I know you will too. Before I dive in, I just want to tell you for a few minutes about the weekend I just had. I just spent 4 days, 50 hours total, training with Tony Robbins. And whether or not you know who he is or not, you're either a fan or you have no idea who he is. It just really has me excited and thinking about how when we believe in something and when we immerse ourselves in learning it, and then we take what we learn and we apply it, life can truly change. And when I think about that, I'm so excited about the Mood Shift Method Live workshop that we are going to be doing on Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. When I think about what I'm going to teach you in this workshop, it can absolutely change your life, no matter where you are in your journey as a woman. With the 3 steps that you will learn, and this is not like one of those workshops where you're just going to sit there and take notes and not participate and maybe keep your camera off and be half listening. This is, let's go all in and figure out what are the small hinges that move big doors for you. I always say that because there are so many midlife habits that the internet is screaming that we need to do. And at the end of the day, the ones that move the needle the most are the ones I'm going to teach you in this workshop. And the reason why I brought up Tony Robbins is because I found him in 2020. And what I have learned from him and implemented has truly changed my life. In my business, yes, but also in my personal life. In fact, maybe I'll talk about this on another episode, but this past weekend, I had a huge breakthrough with my relationship. My point is, when there is something that you just know that you want to change or make better, oftentimes you have to make an investment in your learning, in your time to figure out what it is, what do I really need to do? And if mood swings or anxiety are part of your life, I know for certain that it is stealing joy from your everyday. When you can't be present with your family or excelling in your career or just enjoying everyday life because you feel like you're at the mercy of your moods or anxiety, that is just not living into your full potential. And it doesn't have to be that way. The reason why I know that is because I've worked with women with these steps. I've used them on myself. This is evidence-based. This is not some, hey, let's get on a Zoom call and talk midlife. It's not like that. These are actionable steps that when you hear them and you learn them and you apply them, your moods, your anxiety levels will absolutely change. I am 100% confident in that. So I want to get into the episode, but I just wanted to let you know how excited I am for you to be a part of that workshop. You can find the registration at rachelcartarn.com/mood shift. It's also in the show notes. I really just want to see you there because you deserve to feel good in your body. This time of life can be empowering. It can be amazing. We don't have to be at the mercy of these symptoms. So let's dive into the conversation where you can learn more from Dana. And I just want to thank you for being here. If your health feels overwhelming and you are tired of chasing symptoms, and maybe you're looking for a more calm, a more grounded way to understand what's going on in your body, you are in the right place. Welcome to Living Inspired. I'm your host, Rachel Carta. I'm a registered nurse, functional nutrition counselor, and life coach. This podcast is for women who are dealing with fatigue, stress, hormonal changes, sleep issues, and who want to feel calm, confident, and like themselves again, or even so much better. Here, we take a functional root cause approach to women's health, energy, and resilience. we talk about what's really driving the symptoms and how small, sustainable shifts can make a real difference over time. This is a space for clarity, for calm, and for whole person healing. Because feeling better isn't about doing more, and living an inspired life takes intention. It's about what your body, mind, and soul are asking for. And remember, we are all unique, everything is connected, and all things matter. So grab a notebook, a cup of tea, or listen while taking a walk, and let's dive into today's topic. To another episode of the Living Inspired podcast. I am so thrilled today to have Dana Culp with me today. You know, so many high achieving women, they hit their 40s and 50s, and suddenly they feel like they're losing their edge and maybe even losing their minds a little, right? Brain fog, sudden anxiety, unexplained weight gain, and so many more. Oftentimes, these symptoms are misdiagnosed, and if you are in that range, you may have heard it's just stress. Well, I'm here with Dana because she is the exact person to come here and talk to us about this misdiagnosis, how women, like all of us, can stop blaming ourselves, and really importantly, so we can get the targeted care that we actually need. Dana, I'll say a few more things about you, but thank you so much for being here.
I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, and she's the founder of Thrive Midlife Medicine, which is a virtual medical practice. It's focused on women in perimenopause and menopause. And this is so awesome because we need this. Women need this specialization. And I'm so glad that you bring that to us. Can we start by you telling us how did you get into this field?
Mm. I got into this field as so many others find a passion through my own lived experiences.
Mhm.
I have been in family medicine for a very long time, also critical care and those things, but family medicine for the bulk of my practice. And so I've taken care of women in all stages of life for many, many, many years. And it wasn't until I started getting into this phase of life myself that the impact of what is happening really came to the forefront. So for myself, I had a great career, a great family, a wonderful group of friends, and social life, and things started unraveling a bit. A lot of mood changes, a lot of brain fog and dissatisfaction with life, weight gain, trouble sleeping, just and all of those things compounded into a lot of struggle.
Mm.
Um, and even though I knew I was in the age where these things could be happening, that could be hormonally related, but it didn't occur to me that that's what was going on. As most women do, I thought, well, maybe I just need to try a little harder,
Mhm.
work a little harder, do a little more, power through, all the things we tell ourselves. And I did okay for a while, and it wasn't until my blood pressure started going up. And
Mm.
that's when, that was a quantifiable change that I thought, oh goodness, blood pressure. So I did go in to be seen for my blood pressure. And luckily for me, there was a little seed planted in my head that maybe there was something with hormones because I'd never had blood pressure problems before. But that's all that triggered me to go in. So I waited many weeks to get my appointment with my trusted primary care provider. And when I got there, I was immediately dismissed. This is not what's happening. I am not comfortable treating people in this space and talking about hormones. Here's a blood pressure pill and have a nice day.
Mm.
I left that appointment quite devastated. As you can imagine, I'd waited weeks for this appointment. I was hoping for some help and at least some care and some collaboration, and I was utterly dismissed. And I want to point out as well, and I hope we talk about this a little bit today. I walked into that appointment as a contemporary with this person. We treat the same patient population. We care for the same people, have very similar educations, and so I walked into the appointment with on a level playing ground. I know what to say. I know what to ask for. I knew how to work within the system, and I was completely dismissed.
Mm.
And that experience immediately made me think, what do other women have to go through that do not have this experience? From there, I went to an OBGYN because aren't they the ones who take care of women? I waited months for that appointment, and I again dismissed. I was given a some medication that I later found out nobody prescribes anymore for at least 25 years. Very, very outdated care. Handed a prescription. I'll see you in a year. And then I didn't realize how poor that care was until I started looking up the medication. Okay, so from there, I went to a very highly regarded Stanford OBGYN. So I was very excited about that training. And again, OBGYN, and the same thing happened. She had a one size fits all approach. I asked about doses and other options and testosterone and those things. And she said, absolutely not, and sent me on my way. So that was the final straw where I really had a fire lit under me and thought this cannot be how we treat women. And I, from there, got as educated as I could. I read all the research that I could get my hands on. I became certified and went to conferences and joined groups of like-minded providers and took every class I could find and got very educated by the time I showed up to my fourth provider's office. And I went into that appointment very ready. And she stopped me and said, I don't know anything about this. I'm so sorry, but I am willing to work with you and learn. And so she is still with me to this day, my new primary, and she's amazing. But that is my story, that it took me well over a year to get care that was even considered up to standard. And so with that, I changed my family medicine practice to only midlife women with a hormonal focus. And then that just became too overloaded. So I created Thrive Midlife Medicine so I could help take care of women in a much larger geographic area. So now we're on the West Coast and quickly expanding eastward. So that is a long-winded story of how I got here. But like a lot of women, my experience was just so devastating. And all I want to do is have other women not have to go through that.
Dana, thank you for sharing that. And I will tell you that I have heard that story so many times. I myself have gone through something similar, and I know that so many women listening right now have been where you are. So I appreciate your bravery in sharing that and just in really hearing the frustration and how you were also able to turn that into what you have created that now is helping so many women that are so that they never have to go to the doctor and hear this dismissal again, so that they can feel like they're not crazy, that what they're experiencing is real. And I think let's take a second and talk about that because I feel like
Yes.
so many women think I'm losing my mind. And let me just give you a quick example. I've always been like a very calm person for a long time. And as I got into my mid 40s, I'm starting to notice that it takes a lot more for me to stay calm. And I'm noticing that it feels different in my body. And that's just one example. So please talk a little bit about this idea that we suddenly feel different, it feels sudden.
That's so interesting the way you put that. Because it can happen so slowly
Hmm.
and slowly, and then suddenly. And that is, I like to think of it as like the tipping point. We are so resilient. We work so hard. We push through. That is just the nature of a woman until we can't. And then it feels like it's very sudden. Also, I think a lot of the changes that happen, and we can talk about what's happening and how that happens. But with the changes that happen, they're so ethereal. My mood. Does that person deserve for me to be irritated at them, or is this something about? You know what I mean? It's not. It's so tangible. It's really tough. So I think that is part. That's part of the confusion. Is what's wrong with me, what's happening to me, why I don't feel like myself, but you can't really put your finger on it exactly. There are some tangible things that are often what do send women into my office or in front of my computer screen for the telemedicine piece of it. And that are the tangible things like weight gain, which is probably one of the first reasons a woman wants to get help is she's gaining, or can't lose, and all the things she's always done. I'm eating less, I'm moving more, nothing is moving the needle. And that's something you can see and you can measure. And like I was speaking about myself earlier, I can measure that blood pressure. But the mood changes and the foggy thinking and the lack of resiliency being able to juggle very complicated lives where it used to be pretty easy and now it just seems completely unmanageable. That's just so hard to measure.
Mhm.
And so I think women end up suffering a lot more than they need to and getting a further down that road than they need to before that tipping point where they seek out help. And hopefully they will seek out help with somebody who will look at them as a whole person and not just as this symptom and that symptom. Here's a blood pressure medicine, here's some antidepressants or a sleeping pill or the things that treat the symptoms, and look a little further upstream at a woman through a hormonal lens to see how many of these symptoms could possibly be attributed to hormonal changes.
That's such a good point that we need to take a minute on this idea of let's not treat symptoms one by one. In my work, that's exactly what I don't do. We're looking at what's the big picture? What is the root cause? What are the root causes behind these symptoms? And one of those root causes can be these hormone imbalances and so many other things, nervous system dysregulation, gut dysbiosis. Like there's so many things that can be at the root of what's going on. And yet, when we go to the PCP, it's funny that you said about eat less, move more, because I shared on the podcast about a year ago, I went to my own PCP and brought up some of these things and talked about weight gain. And she said, eat less, move more. She also said, it's just going to get worse the older you get. And I remember just, she doesn't know what I do. There were other things that happened in that appointment that I just felt like you know, hopeless in a lot of ways. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get help? And so I'm glad that you brought up the idea of treating your patients and people as a whole, holistically, looking at what could be contributing to this. Now, before our call, I was looking on your website and it made me think about, women struggle for years before they get real answers. And
Yes.
like you just talked about that in your own story. I would love to hear your thoughts on why that is. And I know that a lot of it has to do with the training. And you're a nurse practitioner. You've been in the field for 25 years. I don't think I mentioned that in the beginning. And that's important because you've seen it. You've been trained, classically trained, so you know. Why do women have to struggle so long?
Ooh, that is a loaded question, and
Right.
there's so many pieces to that. Let's see. I will start with I think the way we are wired. We can take on so much as women. If we choose to have kids, a great career, a partner, social commitments, volunteer organizations. We do a lot, and we push through. We try harder. We juggle things, and we put ourselves on the back burner. So we take care of everything else and everybody else first, and then if there's any time left, maybe I'll get some of those leftover time scraps. So I think that is the first thing. I think we're wired that way. We can multitask and take care of everybody. But I also think culturally, that is kind of the expectation unconsciously as we're coming up of not complaining, being nice, making sure we take care of everybody else. And so I think that's a really complicated thing in our culture. So I think that is the biggest thing that of why it takes so long for a woman to allow herself to take first position in anything. And then the next thing I think is the lack of be able to objectively look at what's happening. Again, mood things I can't sleep. Maybe it's because I'm stressed. Those things. And then the third thing is the lack of training in our healthcare profession. The providers are not trained in women's health in this stage of life, the post-reproductive years or this hormonal change years. So we do know that even OBGYNs, again, who aren't they the ones who take care of women? Only 1 in 5 have any training at all during their medical school on this stage of life. The focus is much more on reproduction and then when things are malfunctioning, but not the hormonal piece. So 1 in 5, and that's not to say that there aren't just amazing providers out there, including OBGYNs, but I submit that if they are amazing and they're up to date on the current evidence, that they sought that training out themselves. They did not learn that in school. So we stopped training providers for the most part about 25 years ago. And and we just haven't caught up yet. So we have, women may or may not choose to have children, but every one of us, if we're lucky to live that long, we're going to go through menopause. And to not have our healthcare providers look at us through that lens and recognize that and know how to care for us is just it's a tragedy in healthcare. So very, very complicated question that you asked, and it's so multifactorial. But I think those are the three biggest reasons why the care is so poor in our overall healthcare system.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. We put ourselves on the back burner. Oftentimes, what I've seen is it takes like cumulative life stress for some of these symptoms to get worse and worse and worse until they become something where you do end up crying in your doctor's office and needing help. And then you said some of these symptoms are more, they're not tangible, they're not easy to nail down what they could be. And then you talked about the training that is just completely lacking, and it is a travesty, and it's infuriating on a lot of levels also that this is just falling through the cracks. And I'm so glad that someone like you exists and that, you have made it your life's mission to stand in the gap where so many women need what you do. I would love now if I could hear. So, there's a lot of misinformation about hormone therapy. And I know that the black box warning was just taken off of the estrogen. I'd love to hear, it's funny because I went to this, around New Year's, I went to this gathering of women. And one of them was talking about perimenopause symptoms. And she mentioned this. She said, you know, why is this a thing now? Why is this a thing? And I thought that was so funny because it's always been a thing since there have been women, but we weren't talking about it. And in my opinion, I feel like maybe the last 5 years or so, it's been talked about more. And I just thought that was interesting that I think about my own mother and what she went through. I remember her crying more. I remember her freaking out more. I remember that as a child. And so talk to us about this idea. What are the facts? What's all this fear around hormone therapy and what's real? What's true? What do we listen to?
Okay. I think starting with fear is probably a good place to start because there are some big messages that have been put out for decades, very fearful messages. And the first one is just the misunderstanding of the role in hormones in our health, and assuming that if we are replacing a hormone that we have made our entire lives, somehow now magically it's going to give us cancer. That came about around 25 years ago with the WHI study. It was one of the largest women's studies of the time. At the time, women were not really allowed into studies. A lot of people don't recognize that. There was male studies and animal studies that were extrapolated to women, but there weren't a lot of studies that included women. So there was an exciting time. They're having this huge study. It was going to be about women. It was a very poorly designed study in many ways, but we don't need to get into that. But it was wildly misinterpreted. But what ended up happening was the study was stopped short. They were looking at cardiovascular disease in menopausal women in relation to hormone replacement therapy. But what they thought they saw was an uptick in breast cancer. So they stopped the study short, sent out the warning, the message of, oh no, we think this is what's happening. And even though they immediately backtracked that, and it's been disproven countless times all over the world, that bell was already rang, and that was the message that went out. And so you probably have heard that too. Most of us did, that hormones, our own hormones even, are going to give us cancer. So that's the biggest fear, and I think one of the toughest things to overcome, because women they don't understand what their options are. They don't understand that that's not true, and they continue to also perpetuate that fear, which is a complete myth. So that's the biggest thing. And I think the second thing I would want to point out that is really, really misunderstood is how to look at hormones and hormone replacement therapy. We think of We think of the woman, tearing off her clothes and she's having a hot flash, and we all know that women in hot flashes, right? And it can be kind of a chuckle, but that is just the tip of the iceberg, and that is also just a symptom. And there's other symptoms: the weight gain, the brain fog, the anxiety, rage, lack of sleep, those cardiovascular changes with hot flashes and such. All kinds of sexual dysfunction. So I think there's 80 symptoms. So that's one thing, is we look at this cluster of symptoms and we want to treat them so women feel better and feel like themselves again. But back to misunderstanding, there's also this understanding of what our hormones and lack thereof do to our long-term health, and discounting that piece has been also just a horrific injustice to women. Our hormones protect us from protect our bones, protect our cardiovascular system, our brains, and so. Even if you can tough it out and get to the other side when these symptoms start to go away, what does long-term you and future you look like with this hormone depletion? So I guess that's a myth, or maybe a misunderstanding, that there's symptom control and then there's our long-term health, and that is very, very misunderstood.
Yeah, and I feel like not a lot of people are talking about either one of those things. And I think that even practitioners hold not having the knowledge of the two things you just discussed. I think that is true. Even our PCPs and OBGYNs, like you said, there's amazing ones. And then there's a lot that aren't even on the same page of understanding those two things that you said.
The vast majority, unfortunately.
Yeah, completely. It just, and I know there are some, maybe at the end you could share some ways for people that aren't in your area to find,
Yes.
you know, to find some help. I would love to hear the difference between synthetic hormones and bioidentical hormones.
Okay, I love that topic. And that is one of the misunderstandings with the WHI study. That study was talking about synthetic hormones, which is what we had at the time. For instance, the estrogen that was used for hormone replacement that gave women great relief from their symptoms is conjugated equine estrogen, which comes from horses, which pregnant mares, which is many kinds of estrogen that are foreign to our bodies. It gave women, relief, thank goodness, but we don't do that anymore. So there's synthetic hormones, and they are made in a lab. They can help with symptoms. Our bodies don't recognize them as their own, and so the long-term health, the risk-benefit analysis is very different with synthetic. What we use now, and we've been using for quite a long time, at least folks who are working up to the current standards, is what we call bioidentical or body identical, which is all that means is the molecules that our body recognizes as our own. So when you look at synthetic and bioidentical head to head, and you compare risk benefit analysis, yes, you can get symptom relief. But back to that, or is there a cancer component here, or risks to our health? The bioidentical, there's plenty of evidence that shows actually protection against many kinds of cancers. So bioidentical, that is what we use now. This is almost exclusively what I use, and colleagues, like-minded colleagues that I work with across the country. That can come in transdermal forms, also oral forms, vaginal forms, and is the gold standard for if you're practicing up to the evidence at this point. And I can get into the science if you want, but I wanted to give more of a high level, because we hear these terms and what does that mean? It's just, we know, when we know better, we do better, and that's what the bioidentical is now.
Thank you for saying that to us, because I feel like as women, and I want to ask you about this, we need to know how to advocate for ourselves. And one of them would be to say, I want bioidentical. And
Yes.
if we don't even know to ask that question or to say that we want that, that we may not even have that opportunity. So just hearing this, hearing you talk about knowing that that is the route that most women should potentially go.
Absolutely.
Important. And you had mentioned that you wanted to talk earlier about how we can advocate for ourselves.
That is a big, big part of my work now. There is only so many hours of the day, and I can't see all the women, even though I would love to. So the biggest part of my work actually is speaking and educating and helping women be able to advocate for themselves, know how to find a good provider that is an expert in this field, or at least up to standards in this field. How to ask the right questions to make sure that the provider is going to look at you as an equal part of the team. Back to my story of why I brought up being on an equal footing with my primary, or at least thinking I was. Most of us, we walk into the doctor's office and they have the answers, we have the questions, and most people, I don't think, feel like they're on equal footing and can ask questions or maybe dig a little deeper or say, well, how about this instead? It's really hard. So I do like to talk about the questions you can ask and feeling empowered to self-advocate.
Yeah, please,
Yeah.
please tell us some of those because, I think
Okay.
that you're so right that there is that power differentiation that we
Yeah.
come in and that's a whole topic all on its own. I mean, I've had some clients who have been just had terrible experiences because of that kind of power dynamic. And so being able to stand up for yourself, like you said, ask a question, say, well, wait a minute, what about this? Yeah, please say more about the types of questions we can ask, especially for some of us who haven't yet found an OBGYN or haven't yet, used MIDI Health or any of the other types of services that there are. Where do we start and what kind of questions do we ask?
Okay, so let's break that up into two sections. Where do you start? So that is tough because you're going to make a doctor's appointment. You're probably going to have to take the day off of work or find a babysitter, drive across town, pay for parking, spend a good chunk of time, wait for however long to get this appointment. At least that's the way it is here on the West Coast, and I think in most bigger cities or even rural cities. So what the first thing I would do is if you can't go online and feel comfortable with some of the online specialists, which that's such a wonderful thing that we have now, national or regional telemedicine companies like Thrive Midlife Medicine,
Yeah.
and MIDI and other big ones. And I also want to circle back to that as well as far as access. But is I would try to find somebody who at least is designated as an expert. So that can mean Googling. If you are living in an area where maybe there aren't as many resources, telemedicine is a great option. It might feel kind of weird and, not what we're used to, but sometimes that's where you can find amazing specialists. So Googling is great. Referrals, asking your girlfriends, which is why I love that women are talking about this now. Like you said earlier, why is this a thing? Because women are talking to women. And then if you do want to, see if your trusted PCP or your trusted OBGYN is somebody that you should reach out to. You can, when you make the appointment, ask the person who answers the phone. They know, they do. Does Dr. So-and-so, treat women in menopause? Not so much, but this one does. And then you can save yourself a trip because they do know, what kind of patients these providers see. So ask the front desk person when you're making that appointment and save yourself the trip if you're not in the right place. And so those are the things I would do is not wait weeks and months. And it probably took you so long just to recognize, I want to look into this and see if there's something here that I can help. So that's the first thing is to really look for a specialist. And then when you do find somebody that you trust, a couple of key questions I would ask is what kind of training do you have in the specialty? And that might sound a little upfront, but you can absolutely ask that question. Anybody would be proud to tell you what training that they have. You can ask, how do you individualize the treatment? And because that's a big thing, this one size fits all approach is terrible. It does nobody. It's a disservice to women. How are we going to assess how things are going? How are we going to follow up? How are we going to know things are going in the right direction? And the cadence of assessing. Those are the three biggest things I would ask if you do find yourself in front of a provider that you think is the right one for you. So they sound like kind of simple answers, but they can really be impactful.
Yeah, you could save yourself a lot of time. And like you said, the energy of going somewhere, if you found someone in person, being able to actually vet the person before you go. Like we should be allowed to do that and we should know
Yes.
how. So thank you for those questions. I think those are really helpful. We can ask about their training. We can ask is this one size fits all or what is the individualized how do you treat individualistically? And then
Mhm.
the third one was
How are we going to assess my
yes.
progress and follow up?
Yes. How are we going to assess? And that's huge because if we're talking perimenopause, there are fluctuations. And maybe because some people listening might be really not sure. I mean, I've had other episodes where we've talked about what's happening. Could you give us like a high level? We're in perimenopause, hormones are changing. So there has to be that assessment because things are changing. Could you give us some high level understanding of what's happening in our bodies in perimenopause?
Mm. Okay, so we'll back up a little bit. So
Yeah.
menopause, which we've all heard that word, is 12 months without a menstrual cycle. That is officially menopause. That's what that means. And menopause will happen for 80% of American women between the ages of 45 and 55. There's some that'll be earlier, some will be later, but 80% of women that will happen during that span of time. And then we do know the word perimenopause, and that can happen 10 years before a woman's final menstrual cycle. So doing the math backwards, that could be mid 30s, which sounds so young, but changes do start happening at that point. And so that would be the term perimenopause. And what that means is the time before menopause, which is characterized by hormonal fluctuations and hormonal chaos. We still have our hormones, but they are sometimes swinging gently and sometimes swinging wildly. Early menopause is often a little easier, and that is usually characterized by some weight changes, mood changes, maybe some sleep changes. Sometimes it's not as dramatic, and for other folks, we talked earlier that it seems like it hits all of a sudden, but that's just that tipping point. So early perimenopause is a little more subtle, and you wonder, is this life or is this hormones? And I want to go circle back to that. And then late perimenopause, which is the time leading up to to actual menopause, that I would say is probably the toughest time for women, because that is when the hormones are really potentially swinging wildly, and that is so hard on our brains and so hard. It's very hard and the most disruptive for most people. And the goal during that time is to calm our nervous system. When we think of, anxiety, depression, rage, sleep problems, the cardiovascular problems, our nervous system is really overwhelmed, and there's a lot of hope in that stage. I know a lot of providers will not treat perimenopause. They say come back once your periods stop. And we know now that that is not only poor care, but it also is missing an opportunity to start women balancing their hormones earlier and potentially impacting and protecting their long-term health.
So, Dana, you said, is this hormones or is this life?
Yes, and that is one of the problems of why I think women end up waiting for so long, asking those questions and trying to figure it out and trying to push through. On my website, we have a perimenopause quiz.
What?
So at thrivemidlifemed.com, it's just a couple of minutes and it's check boxes. So it's really, really simple, but it is amazing. The results come back really quickly. And I feel like that quiz can at least, trigger the thoughts of maybe there's something else going on that I can actually get help with and that I don't have to suffer with. So yeah, perimenopause I think is one of the toughest stages because it is confusing. It's not as clear cut, and sometimes the symptoms aren't as dramatic. So wondering if this is even what might be happening, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, that's helpful. So the quiz, and I will link that in the show notes so that women can find it and take it. I think that's really important because When you know more, then you can take the right actions. When you have an idea if this could be something that's going on in your body. And I love what you said about the nervous system, because while I believe that's important at every stage of life, you mentioned that, as the later stages of perimenopause, we're getting closer to menopause, which is that last period, basically. It's even more, the fluctuations are even more extreme. And just being able to regulate your nervous system and being able to know how to do that and to know why the things you used to do before to feel calm and grounded don't seem to work as well. That's the other
Mhm.
thing I've noticed. There's this real change in resilience that women are finding and seeing. And I know that has to do with the hormones changing, because those hormones are like a buffer to allow
Mhm.
us to be everything for everyone. Whether or not that's good or not, they do allow us to do that. And then they change, and maybe we can't take it anymore.
That was so well said. And yes, a buffer, but I always say hormones aren't the cause of everything, and they are not the cure for everything.
Glad you said that.
So I do think a proper assessment and looking at that foundational piece is really important. But there's so much more to it.
Yes.
Um, you know, um, working with experts like yourself to manage this from all different angles, and including adding, diet and lifestyle and all those things are so important. So I don't want to make it sound like I think everybody should be on hormones. I actually don't care if women take hormones. What I care about is that women understand what's happening to them, understand there's so many great ways to get help, and that they feel empowered and educated to advocate for themselves and make an informed decision for themselves. That is my overriding goal.
Love that. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because, in my nutrition school, and what I have learned is that there's like this pyramid, and on the very bottom of the pyramid is blood sugar regulation. And then
Yes.
we start talking about adrenals and thyroid, and sex hormones are at the top. So when I look at that and I think about how I look at my clients, and if we're only treating with hormones, which this happens, there are practitioners who just, and I know you know that, but I just talked to someone recently about this, a client where it's those one size fits all protocols. We're not looking at the whole picture. If women aren't eating regularly and their blood sugar is not stable, adding hormones is not going to fix any problems. Well, maybe it fixes some. You would know that more than me, but sometimes it can cause even more problems.
Agreed, agreed. I think a menopause specialist and perimenopause specialist will look at a woman holistically in that way. The cardiometabolic factor pieces, insulin, thyroid, metabolic panel, all of those things. Yes, hormones are a huge piece of it, but they are not everything. And if there can also be conflicting things or two things happening at the same time. So, yes, a woman has to be looked at with all of those markers, not just hormones.
So it sounds like that could be another question that we're asking when we're in the doctor's office. How else, or maybe you have another person, like you said, someone like me who does look at all of those things holistically, but making sure that you have that on board when you're thinking about starting, when you're entering into these years where you're really needing to look at your health differently. Sometimes I joke and I say, I need to do a lot of things to be baseline okay. And it used to be a joke like in my 30s, like early 30s, and now that I'm in my mid 40s, I'm like, yeah, this isn't a joke anymore. There really are things that we have to do to take care of ourselves. And what I have found is the longer we ignore those things, the more compounded they become. And when I think about women as they get one chronic disease and then another, and I heard a statistic at one point, 87% of women have another chronic disease going on, some kind of, whether it's insulin resistance, whether it's an autoimmune condition. Like, there's a lot going on in our bodies, and the hope is that someone is looking at the whole picture, and someone is looking for those root causes, and someone is helping you choose the health habits that actually move the needle,
Yes.
because one size doesn't fit all. I'm sure you believe this for everyone. Not everyone's going to benefit from a meditation practice. Not everyone needs to cut out gluten. Like, whatever these certain things are, You have to be able to find someone who can help you figure out what yours are. And you also brought up looking at lab work, which is something I do that I feel is so important because we have to be able to see where are these potential issues coming up so we can make informed decisions for women's health.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Dana, it has been so great. I feel like we could talk for hours because we just both love this subject. And I appreciate you helping us understand more about hormones and more about midlife and what it looks like, and for giving us a sense of hope that we can figure out how to feel better in our bodies, that we can take this one precious life that we've been given and not have to slog through it, that there can actually be feeling good again. Dana, how can people find you if they want to learn more?
Mm. We thrivemidlifemed.com is the website. It's got a lot of great information on there, and lots of Q&A, so that's super helpful. The perimenopause quiz is on there. There's some wonderful podcasts and other educational things on there to listen to, and then of course the social media, all of the socials that we're all on. But I love what you just said, and this is the message I would like to leave as well, is that sense of hope, knowing that there is hope and there is help. If somebody tells you no, that they just don't know, and they're just not the person you need to be talking to. So there is help, there is hope. This idea of aging and a slow slide into deterioration and irrelevancy, and having our lives go in a different direction, the wrong direction, is not the way it has to be. This second act can be so full of passion and joy and empowerment, and I want that for every woman, and that's why I do the work that I do, and I'm sure you could attest to that. That's what you're about too. So hope is the message I want to leave everyone with.
Yeah, thank you. And everyone, I hope you heard, lean in again because Dana said, if they say no, they just don't know. I
Yeah, they just
love
don't know.
that. That's so good because we don't have to necessarily blame or get mad. We just, okay, that wasn't the right practitioner for me. I'm going to find one who is.
Yeah,
Um, I always say one of my guiding beliefs is believe in your ability to figure things out and just continue to persist until you succeed. And sometimes as women in this stage, finding the right practitioner, this is what we have to do. Believe that it's possible. Believe that we can feel better. And like you said, there's so much great stuff about this time of life too, where it's like we're not taking it anymore in a lot of ways, and that's
yeah,
cool too. We should have part two where we talk about that. Like, what are we no longer going to accept? Everyone listening, go back to episode 72 and listen to Brooke Davis and I. We talk about that a little bit more, and it's very empowering and fun to hear, okay, how could life look different? And especially now, you're able to put yourself first a little more and you're able to take care of yourself on another level. And who knows what your second act could have? Who knows what it could look like, right? It could look like a
absolutely.
new business. It could look like, just a great new hobby, a new relationship. Like, who knows what it could have? Like, you're not done. You're not done. You've got so much more to do and be. So, Dana, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us. Is there anything else you want to mention?
I'm just so happy to be on your show. I love the work that you do, and I just want to help get the message out with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And listeners, I'm just so proud of you for listening. I'm so proud of you for growing every time you put on a podcast like this. You go to Dana's website, you follow the social media of both of us. You are saying that I want to feel good and I'm going to take the steps. So I'm so proud of you for continuing to show up. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Living Inspired podcast. Your presence in this space is deeply appreciated. Remember, living a healthy life, mind, body, and spirit doesn't happen by accident. It's the result of conscious choices and intentional living. Each time you listen, you are taking a step towards flooding your life with positivity, love, light, and health. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with 3 friends. I'm honored to be part of your journey. I'll see you in the next episode.